sitting down with a newspaper be a thing of the past? Last week we heard the oldest Sunday paper, The Observer, could be axed after losing readers and, of course, advertising.
And the Sunday Times will start charging its visitors for access as more of us get our news from the web. Well, joining us to discuss this morning, the future of journalism is the former editor of The People, Neil Wallis, and social commentator Fletcher. Welcome to the programme. Neil, you must be quite depressed, mustn't you, about the future of the Sundays? If this talk's going on about we should be reverting to online, the Observer may go, being part of the Sunday newspaper culture?
I'm not depressed about it. No, I think that's a bit disingenuous. I think there's very real and very significant concerns for the entire print media system, and frankly, for all media that isn't on the web. It's a continuing and pernicious problem.
I'm just wondering, Mal, you know, I know it sounds like it's like you have a thing with Sunday papers particularly. Am I the only person? There is something about Sunday papers. You can open them up, there's lots of them, they're big. It is very much, it's kind of a cultural thing. And I know that these newspapers, The Observer particularly, are dealing with harsh realities of finances. There's something's going wrong between those balances, isn't it?
You know, they're up against the dominant culture of the web today, which is about free exchange of information. People don't expect to pay for data on the internet. That's the way the web has grown. This is the age of WeThink, the age of Wikipedia, and I think that newspapers might learn from the gaming community online. It doesn't charge for 90% of its material, but it charges a premium for the 10% that might give people that extra edge, that extra advantage. So in newspapers, the news might be free online, but the editorial, the financial advice may be a charge attached. So, we're up against the dominant culture of the web.
For that to work, though, don't you really need hard, fast news hounds to want to look at that kind of content for the newspapers to make money, rather than the casual sitting with the papers, enjoying the papers on a Sunday? Would that really work?
It can do. I don't like to see the end of print media because, as you say, there's something comfortable about sitting down with a newspaper on a Sunday morning. But we do have to face the realities as they are today. And we saw in the post-Iran election situation how powerful social networking media are, for example, in giving people the opportunity to get raw, on-the-spot news. It's not edited, it's not well collated, but it gives people the opportunity to get news as it happens and to engage the conversation so that perhaps in some way they feel they're a voice for change.
Yes, Neil,
the problem is, though, that you used a word there that's not actually accurate. We got a person's perception of what was happening. Now, news is something these guys produce, right? Twitter is what I think at a particular moment, and that's the great discrepancy between the web and the conventional media. But now the big problem is this. It's absolutely straightforward, clear as a bell. Who pays? Who pays? The BBC is this fantastic organisation, and recently spent hundreds of thousands of pounds, my guess, is covering the situation in southern Africa with Mugabe, smuggling people in, etc. Who paid? Well, actually, in this occasion, us four paid, and all the other taxpayers. Now, the other people who are doing that is the print media. Now, who pays to put the print media in there? The advertiser does. The person who buys the newspaper does. And if you cut off the newspapers, if you stop the cover price, if you don't start reading, continue to read the ads, there is no money to send to do that, what you might call quality journalism.
Clearly, that's the principle. A lot of people would agree with, it has to be paid for somehow. But these, if you like, the sand is shifting beneath, isn't it? Because there is a generation growing who think that on the internet, you don't have to pay. You don't go onto a website and then, sign up to a subscription. What you do is it's there, and if it's not there free, they will go somewhere where it is.
What happened was, people had a belief that the advertising you saw in the print media or on TV would migrate onto the web as well. That was what that was based on, essentially. And also the basic anarchic attitude, if you like, of the web. But serious organisations thought the advertising would follow. The truth of it is that there hasn't been an advertising boom on the web. In fact, at the moment, it is going completely the opposite direction. So what you have is these tremendous, fantastic web operations, like the BBC Online, is a fantastic thing. It could not possibly exist if we weren't paying for it. There's also another problem, which is, if you like, web theft, which is that organisations like the BBC Online, Google, Yahoo, they basically steal wholesale from the print media. And it's a huge problem because much of their content actually comes from the people there in those newspapers. Well, there is a big problem in this because, you know, how should the BBC be allowed to steal the content that came from the Daily Telegraph MP's expenses stories? Because every single night they got the Telegraph and they stuck it all online.
Mal, give us the last thought because we're kind of short on time, and there is a problem there, isn't there?
There is. I mean, the music industry's learning this. Musicians and promoters are wising up to the fact that people don't expect to pay. So they're giving their music away online, but then charging a premium for the live concert and using the net to promote the live concert, where they also sell extra merchandise, which has that extra element, you know, the making of DVD and that sort of thing. So people will pay. It's just a matter of how we monetise them. I think it's
all right. Okay. For the moment, we'll leave it there. Thank you both very much.
No,
Speak to you later.
I think we've arrived at a place where the cost of the web is so significant, and the revenue coming in from the web is so small that something has to give. I think it has to be considered. I think that it can be the only way forward. Journalism is an expensive business. If you're the BBC, the taxpayer pays for it, and so you get brilliant journalism. We investigate Mugabe in Zimbabwe, atrocities around the world, the tsunami. That's a real cost, but the BBC is paid for by the taxpayer. If you're an independent organisation, something has to fund that. And my belief is very, very deeply held that we can't allow a situation to evolve where the only source of news is the BBC, and we're in a very severe danger in this country of mainstream media organisations, print organisations, and actually, particularly in the regional area, there is a suggestion that half of our regional newspapers could fold because of the problems they're having with income. How do they run websites? Who investigates, if you like, who calls to account the local council when there is no print media to cover it?
Okay, Mal, is there enough advertising potential out there to run an online service, and are there the people to log on to that and sustain it?
Well, there's certainly the people. The internet's
and
grown.
The interest.
The interest is there. What the advertising is, the school's still out on that. I think there are other ways, perhaps, though, to monetise the content, and one might be that we give away the news, which people can get anywhere now for free anyway, but we monetise the 10% at a premium. The 10% might be the editorial comment, because, you know, people will gather news, but they still need someone to make sense of it, put it into a content, someone who's trained to do that. So that could be an area where newspapers charge a premium. Also in financial advice, areas that add value to people's lives. But to charge money for news itself is running counter to the culture of the web. I just don't think that will ever fly.
Neil, what do you draw parallels with in terms of other cultures? I was thinking of books, novels. There was a time, not so long ago, everyone was sort of saying it's the end of the book. You know, people won't buy books. You can read them on your internet page. You can have special computer books, and yet sales of books have gone up, haven't they? I mean, they're selling better than ever.
I think the truth of the matter is there is a huge appetite for news out there. The significant thing that Mal just said, you asked Mal about advertising revenues coming into the web. The jury's not out on it. The jury has voted. And what's happened is that revenues from advertising on the web are collapsing. And it's not just a recession, it was happening before then. And the problem you come back to is who pays to create the content that people want to devour. Now, I don't believe there is a defined idea yet of how that charging will go. I think Mal is absolutely right when he talks about things like financial services, which is what the Wall Street Journal does, the FT's moving into. But what we need to accept is that content creation is a very expensive business. And what you have at the moment with the web is wholesale plundering going on of the, if you like, the Telegraph with its MP's expenses stories was being taken wholesale by whether it's Google News or, frankly, BBC Online, being stuck up for free, being read by all of these people, and yet nobody is helping the Telegraph pay for breaking that story. It cannot continue. Something has to give, which is why, give him his due, Rupert Murdoch, who's always been an entrepreneur, is saying, let's look at some different ways, because it can't go on like this.
Okay.
And Mal, just one last thought. I mean, what will change ultimately? Because I know things like Facebook and Twitter, they're saying that those are taken up by older people largely. The younger generation thinking that's not for them either. So there's a strange things going on.
Well, that's the problem the business community faces with the internet, because as soon as the big business comes in, the early adopters and adapters that drove these innovations pull out.
Yeah.
Because their attitude is this is not about big business. I mean, that goes back to Tim Berners-Lee in 1989. It's part of the web culture to be a little bit anti-business, a little bit anti-profit. That's where the challenge comes in for
And
journalism.
none of these sites make any money. They're all struggling to survive financially.
We are out of time now, but thank you both very much for your time this morning.
Thank you. It's coming up to